The sun was merciless in the endless desert. The golden sand stretched in every direction, rolling like waves of an ocean that had no water, no life, no mercy. The air was hot and dry, every breath like swallowing fire. Nothing moved under that burning sky, except for her. An alien girl lay half buried in the sand, her silver armor cracked and scarred from battle. Her long hair was tangled with dust, and her lips were pale from thirst. She was young, barely more than a girl, but her eyes carried the weight of betrayal. She had been left behind. Her people had abandoned her. The memory was sharp, even in her weakened mind. The battle had gone wrong. The enemy was stronger than expected. When retreat was ordered, she tried to follow. But her wounds slowed her. Her legs had buckled, and she had fallen. She remembered calling out, her voice breaking in desperation. She remembered the eyes of her commander, cold, unfeeling, as he turned away. She was no longer useful. She was left to die. Now the desert was her prison, and the silence was her only companion. Her breaths came in ragged gasps. Each time she closed her eyes, she thought it would be the last. She whispered in her language, words of regret, words of anger, words of fear. The sand seemed to swallow her voice. But then movement. At first, she thought it was a mirage. Heat could play tricks on the mind, creating shapes where there was nothing. She blinked against the bright light, struggling to focus. A figure appeared on the horizon. It was walking, steady, determined. She forced her eyes open wider, her heart beating weakly in her chest. The figure grew clearer with each step. It was tall, broad-shouldered, carrying something across its back. Not alien, not of her kind, a human. Her mind reeled. Her people had spoken of humans often, with disdain. They were described as fragile, primitive, too emotional to survive in the galaxy's cruel wars. She had been taught to look down on them, to never expect anything from them. But here, in the middle of her final moments, a human was the only one walking toward her. The girl tried to move, to reach out, but her strength was gone. Her hands sank back into the sand, trembling. She closed her eyes for a moment, fearing he would pass her by, fearing he would not even notice. The sound of footsteps grew closer. He stopped beside her. For a long moment, neither moved. The human crouched down, his shadow falling across her face. She opened her eyes slowly, and for the first time, she saw his expression. Not cruel, not mocking, but cautious and strangely gentle. Her throat was too dry to speak. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The human studied her, his eyes narrowing as if weighing a decision. She saw the hesitation. Should he help her, or should he leave her? He could walk away. It would be safer for him. She was not his responsibility. She was not even his kind. A drop of water touched her lips. Her eyes widened. He had pulled a flask from his pack and was holding it to her mouth. The water was warm, but to her it tasted like life itself. She drank greedily, coughing as it rushed down her throat. He pulled it back before she could choke as she stared at him with disbelief. Why? Why would humans save her? The human said nothing. He simply lifted her carefully as if she were fragile glass. She tried to protest, but her voice was too weak. He carried her with effort, his arms straining under the weight of her armor. Yet he did not put her down. Each step he took left deep marks in the sand. The girl rested her head against his shoulder, her vision blurring. She could feel his heartbeat, steady, strong, alive. A strange warmth filled her chest, a warmth she had not felt since before the betrayal. The desert stretched on, silent and vast, but now she was no longer alone. Her thoughts whispered in fragments. Why? Why me? Why now? The human walked without words, but his actions spoke louder than any language. For the first time since her people abandoned her, she felt something she thought was lost forever. Hope. The human carried her across the endless desert. Each step was heavy, but his resolve never wavered. The sun burned his skin, the sand resisted his every movement, and the weight of the armored alien girl made his muscles ache. Yet he kept going. The alien girl felt the rise and fall of his chest as he breathed hard. She could feel the effort in every movement, and part of her wanted to tell him to stop. She was a burden, She had been told all her life that humans were selfish creatures who thought only of themselves. And yet, this one was carrying her through hell itself. Her eyes half opened. She studied his face from where her head rested against his shoulder. His skin was darkened by the sun, sweat dripping down, but his eyes were sharp and focused. He was not smiling, nor was he frowning. He was simply determined. At last, he reached a rocky hill that broke the flatness of the desert. Hidden in the stones was a small shelter, nothing more than canvas and metal scraps tied together. To the alien girl, it felt like a palace compared to the emptiness outside. He laid her down gently on a bedroll. Her armor clanked against the stones, but he adjusted her so she was comfortable. She tried to move, but her body refused. The human left her for a moment. She panicked, thinking he had finally abandoned her too. But within minutes, he returned with a small bowl of water and strips of dried food. He placed them near her, then sat back against the wall of the shelter, watching her closely. Her throat ached, but she forced herself to whisper. The words came broken, her language foreign to him. "Why help me?" He tilted his head. He did not understand, but his eyes softened, and he reached out, pouring a little water onto a cloth and pressing it against her cracked lips. His action was his answer. She stared at him. Confusion battled with anger in her chest. Why would a human care if she lived or died? Her people had abandoned her without hesitation. Yet this stranger, this supposed weak species, was fighting the desert itself to keep her alive. Her heart resisted trust. She remembered the betrayal too well. She remembered the cruel laughter of those who left her behind. Trust was dangerous. Trust could kill. Still, her body betrayed her suspicion. She drank the water, ate the dried food, and felt life returning piece by piece. Days passed in the shelter. She healed slowly. Each sunrise, she opened her eyes to find the human still there. He repaired parts of her armor with simple tools. He shared his food, even when it left him hungry. He never spoke much, but his silence was steady, not cold. At night, she dreamed of her people. She dreamed of the moment they walked away from her broken body. Sometimes she cried out in her sleep. And always, she woke to the human's quiet gaze, his hand ready to comfort, but never forcing it upon her. Their worlds had been enemies for so long, yet here, in the middle of a desert no one else cared about, something unexpected was being born. The barrier of mistrust was strong, but cracks were forming. One evening, as the sky turned red with the setting sun, she managed to sit up for the first time. Her body shook, but she did it. The human looked at her, and for the first time, she caught the hint of a smile on his face. "Strong," he said in his language. She understood the word, even if barely. Her lips parted. A single word escaped, halting and heavy. "Thank you." The silence between them shifted. It was no longer the silence of strangers, but the silence of two beings who understood something beyond words. And in that fragile moment, she realized something terrifying. She was beginning to trust him. The days in the desert were long, and the nights were cold. The alien girl's body healed little by little, but her heart still carried deep scars. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of her people turning away, leaving her to die. The pain of betrayal was harder to heal than the wounds on her skin. The human kept her alive. He gave her water before he drank himself. He cut pieces of cloth from his own clothes to bind her wounds. When her armor was too heavy, he carefully placed it aside and cleaned the scratches on her body. He never asked for thanks, never demanded anything in return. She could not understand him fully, but she began to read his actions. His silence was not cruel. It was calm, steady, like a shield against the storm. One night, as the desert wind howled outside the shelter, her breathing grew shallow. Pain spread through her chest. She thought the end had come at last. She whispered in her language, "I am dying." Her voice was weak, almost lost in the wind. The human knelt beside her. His face was tense for the first time. He held her shoulders gently, keeping her awake. He spoke words she did not understand, but his tone was fierce, commanding her to live. He crushed herbs between his fingers, mixing them with water, and pressed the bitter liquid to her lips. She resisted, but he forced her to drink. The taste was sharp, burning her throat, but slowly the tightness in her chest eased. Her breaths came easier. She fell into dreams. In her dream, she saw herself once again abandoned in the desert. The shadows of her people walked away, their voices cold and distant. She called to them, but none looked back. Then, from the darkness, the human appeared. He held out his hand, and where his shadow touched the sand, flowers grew. She reached for him, tears falling, and he pulled her out of the emptiness. When she woke, the human was sitting at her side, watching her carefully. She stared at him in silence, the memory of the dream mixing with the reality before her eyes. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "You saved me." He did not answer. He only handed her water. But in that silence, she understood. Days turned into weeks. She grew stronger, her wounds healing. She was able to walk again, though still weak. She practiced standing while the human watched, ready to catch her if she fell. Each small step forward felt like a victory, a rebellion against the fate her people had chosen for her. Sometimes she wondered why this human risked so much for her. He had no reason. He could have left her. He should have left her. And yet, here he was, sharing his food, his shelter, his strength. The thought frightened her. Trust was dangerous, but her heart kept betraying her mind. Each time he looked at her with quiet determination, she felt the walls inside her begin to crack. One evening, as the sun sank low, painting the desert in red and gold, she sat outside the shelter with him. The silence between them was peaceful, not heavy. She spoke in her language, knowing he would not understand. "My people abandoned me, but you stayed." The human turned his head slightly. He did not speak, but his eyes met hers, and in them she saw the answer. She lowered her gaze, emotions she could not name filling her chest. Fear, gratitude, confusion, hope. But hope was dangerous too. That night, as she lay awake staring at the stars, a terrible thought struck her. What if her people returned? What if they found her here, alive with a human? They would not forgive her. They would not forgive him. And yet, for the first time, she did not wish to go back to them. The human had given her something her people never had, kindness without condition. Between life and death, between betrayal and hope, she was beginning to see a truth her people had always hidden. Maybe humanity was not weak. Maybe humanity was something far stronger. The desert nights were cold, colder than the alien girl had ever imagined. She wrapped herself in a blanket the human had given her, staring at the flickering firelight. Across from her, the human sat quietly, sharpening a small blade on a stone. The rhythm was calm, steady, almost comforting. And yet, her heart was not calm. She watched him carefully, studying his every movement. The way he drank water slowly, never wasting a drop. The way he always offered her food before taking his own share. The way he rose at every sound in the night, ready to protect them both. It was not what she had been taught. Her people had filled her head with stories of humans. Weak, cowardly, selfish, a species barely worth notice in the vast galaxy. But this man, this silent human who had carried her through fire and sand, did not fit those stories. He was not weak. He was not selfish. Still, doubt remained. Her people had betrayed her. Why should she trust anyone again? Even him? The human looked up suddenly, catching her stare. For a moment, their eyes met. She quickly turned away, embarrassed at being caught. Her chest tightened. She wanted to trust him, but fear chained her heart. The next day, as the sun rose high, she tried to stand without his help. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to walk a few steps outside the shelter. The human followed, watching silently. When she stumbled, his hand shot out to steady her. She pulled away instantly, glaring at him. "No," she said in broken words, shaking her head. He paused, then lowered his hand. His eyes did not show anger, only patience. He stepped back, letting her try again. She walked a little farther, then fell to her knees in the sand. Pain shot through her body, and frustration burned in her chest. The human came close once more, but this time he did not touch her. He simply stood beside her, silent, waiting. Slowly, she lifted her eyes to him. For the first time, she saw something she had never noticed before: respect. He was letting her fight her own battle. She realized then that his kindness was not weakness. It was strength, a strength she had never understood before. That night, as they sat by the fire, she tried to speak. Her words were broken, her language clumsy, but she pushed them out. "My people," said, "humans weak." The human tilted his head, listening. She pressed her hand to her chest. "But you strong, not weak." For the first time, his lips curved into a small smile. It was faint, almost hidden, but it reached his eyes. She felt heat rise in her face, a strange warmth she could not explain. The barrier between them was slowly breaking. Still, shadows of fear lingered. She dreamed again of her people, their cold voices echoing. She woke in the night, trembling. The human sat nearby, half asleep, but when he saw her distress, he shifted closer. He did not touch her, but his presence alone calmed her racing heart. The bond between them grew, fragile yet undeniable. But trust is never born without a test. One evening, as they searched the rocky hills for water, the girl froze. Her sharp ears caught a distant sound, low hums carried by the wind. Her heart stopped. She knew that sound. Engines. Her people's scouts were near. Fear gripped her chest. If they found her here, alive, with a human, they would kill them both. She glanced at the human. He had heard nothing, but he noticed her fear. His eyes narrowed, alert, his hand gripping the blade at his side. The girl's thoughts raced. Should she warn him? Should she trust him with the truth? Or should she run, hide, and hope he never paid the price for saving her life? Her heart pounded. The barrier of trust had cracked, but now it would shatter, one way or another. The desert night was quiet, too quiet. The alien girl sat near the small fire, staring into the flames. The human was sharpening his blade again, his movements slow, controlled like always. But her mind was far away, caught on the sound she had heard earlier, the low hum of engines carried by the wind. She knew what it meant. Scouts. Her people's scouts. Her heart pounded as she tried to hide her fear. She told herself it might have been the wind, or a trick of her imagination. But deep down, she knew the truth. Her people had come back. Not for her, but for something else. And if they found her here, alive, with a human, it would mean death for them both. The fire cracked. Sparks rose into the air and faded into the dark. She turned her eyes toward the human. He sat calm, focused, but she could see it now. He was listening to the silence, just like her. His hand rested near the hilt of his blade, ready. He knew something was wrong. Hours later, the sound returned. Faint at first, then clearer. The hum of alien engines, moving across the sky. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She stood quickly, her body still weak, but her instincts sharp. The human looked at her, his eyes questioning. She whispered one broken word, the only one he would understand. "Danger." His jaw tightened. He put out the fire at once, covering the glowing embers with sand. Darkness swallowed the shelter. They stood in silence, listening. Then the shadows appeared. In the distance, 3 figures moved across the sand, their armor glinting under the pale moonlight. Alien scouts. Her people. She recognized the shape of their weapons, the way they scanned the horizon. They were hunting, searching for survivors or traitors. Fear burned inside her. Her first instinct was to run, to hide. But then she looked at the human. He was watching the scouts with steady eyes, no panic in his face. Slowly, he moved her behind him, placing himself between her and the approaching danger. Her breath shook. Why? Why we protect her like this? He owed her nothing. But still, he stood like a shield before her. The scouts drew closer. Their voices carried on the wind, harsh and metallic through their helmets. They spoke her language. She understood every word. Check this area. No survivors should remain. She felt her blood run cold. They would kill her if they found her alive. Worse, they would kill the human simply for being near her. Her mind screamed at her, "Do not trust him. Do not drag him into your death." But her heart whispered something different. He has not left you. He will not leave you now. The human crouched low, gripping his blade. He looked at her, his eyes sharp. He motioned with his hand, "Stay quiet." She obeyed. The scouts moved closer, their footsteps crunching in the sand. One stopped, scanning the rocks near the shelter. The beam of his visor light swept across the darkness. It stopped only a few steps away from where they hid. The girl's heart raced. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But before she could move, the human's hand pressed gently against hers, steadying her. His grip was firm, calm. It told her without words, "Stay. Trust me." The scout turned his head, then moved on. The danger passed for now, but she knew this was only the beginning. The scouts would return. They would search again, and next time, they might not miss. When the night was finally safe, she collapsed against the wall of the shelter, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The human sat nearby, his blade still in his hand, his eyes watching the horizon. She whispered, barely able to speak, "They're my people." The human turned his head slowly. His face was unreadable, but his silence spoke more than words. He understood. Tears filled her eyes. She had been abandoned by her people, and now they had returned only to finish what they started. But the human, this stranger who owed her nothing, had risked himself to protect her. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe the impossible. Maybe she was safer with him than she had ever been with her own kind. The desert was quiet again, but the alien girl knew the silence was only a mask. Her people's scouts would return. They always returned. Once they caught a scent, they did not stop until the target was erased. The human had not slept all night. He sat with his blade across his knees, watching the horizon. The fire was gone, the shelter hidden in shadows. He was ready. She watched him from where she sat, her heart heavy with fear. She wanted to tell him to leave her. She wanted to tell him he did not need to fight her battles. But each time she tried, the words died in her throat. He would not leave. She knew it. By morning, the sound came again. Engines. Closer this time. The girl's blood turned cold. She stood, though her legs were weak. The human looked at her, then at the horizon, where shapes were already appearing in the distance. 3 scouts, marching straight toward them. There was no time to hide. The human rose to his feet, blade in hand. His stance was firm, ready, like a man who had faced death many times before. The girl felt her chest tighten. He was going to fight them. Alone. No, she whispered, shaking her head. Her voice broke. They kill you. They kill us both. But he only looked at her once, his eyes calm, unafraid. Then he stepped forward, placing himself between her and the approaching scouts. The aliens came fast, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. One shouted in her language, "Traitor, you dare survive?" The girl's breath caught. They had seen her. There was no escape. The first scout raised his weapon. The human moved like lightning. His blade flashed, striking the weapon aside. The scout stumbled, surprised by the speed of someone he thought weak. The human drove his shoulder into the alien's chest, sending him crashing into the sand. The second scout fired. A beam of energy cut across the air, missing the human by inches. He rolled, the sand exploding where the blast struck. He rose again, charging forward, his blade slicing through the weapon's barrel, sparks flying. The girl could only watch, frozen in shock. She had seen humans fight before, but never like this. He was fast, fearless, his movements sharp and precise. Every strike was meant to protect her. The third scout circled wide, raising his weapon toward her. Panic flooded her chest. She stumbled backward, too weak to run. The scout's visor glowed as he aimed. No. Her voice tore through the air. The human turned instantly. Without hesitation, he threw his blade. The steel spun through the night and struck the scout's hand. The weapon dropped, clattering on the stones. The human was already there, tackling the alien to the ground. The fight was brutal. The human took hits, his body slammed into the sand, but he never stopped. He fought with his fists, with his teeth, with sheer will. The scouts were stronger, better armed, but he had something they did not. He had a reason. To protect her. The girl's heart pounded. She could not just watch. Her body still hurt, but her spirit burned. She reached for the broken weapon on the ground. Her hand shook as she aimed, her breath ragged. The scout she aimed at turned, his eyes widening behind his visor. Too late. She fired. The blast struck true, sending the alien sprawling. She gasped, her hands trembling, the weapon heavy in her grasp. But she had done it. She had fought beside him. The last scout tried to rise, but the human was already there. With a final strike, he brought him down. The desert went silent again. For a moment, the human stood still, chest heaving, blood dripping from cuts on his arms. Then he turned to her. His face was tired, bruised, but his eyes were steady. She dropped the weapon, tears running down her cheeks. Her legs gave way, and she fell to her knees. The human rushed to her side, catching her before she collapsed. "You?" Her voice broke as she looked up at him. "Why? Why save me again and again?" He held her gently, his hand steady on her shoulder. His words were simple, but they struck her heart like fire. No one deserves to die alone. Her tears flowed freely. Her people had abandoned her. But this human, this stranger from a species she had been taught to despise, had risked everything, his life, his blood, his very soul, to keep her alive. The battle was over, but she knew her life had changed forever. The desert was quiet again, but this time the silence was different. It was no longer the silence of fear or death. It was the silence after survival, the silence after a battle that had tested everything. The alien girl sat by the shelter, her body trembling from exhaustion. Her wounds throbbed, her muscles weak, but her spirit felt strangely alive. She looked at the human, who was tending to his own injuries with strips of cloth. Blood stained his arms, his face was bruised, yet he moved calmly, without complaint. He had fought 3 of her people's scouts and lived. He had risked himself not once, but again and again, for her. She lowered her gaze, tears filling her eyes. She thought of her people, of the cold way they had turned their backs on her. They had seen her as useless, broken, disposable. But this human, who should have hated her, who should have left her in the sand, had seen something else. He had seen someone worth saving. Her chest tightened with emotions she could not name. Gratitude, pain, hope. The human noticed her watching him. He paused, tilting his head, his expression softening. He said nothing. He rarely did, but his silence was no longer empty. It was full of meaning. Slowly, she spoke in her broken words, forcing them out one by one. "My people leave me, but you stay. Why?" He looked at her for a long time. Then he answered simply, his voice calm and steady. "Because no one deserves to die alone." The words struck her like a blade, but not of pain, of truth. She pressed her hand against her chest, her eyes wet. For the first time in her life, she understood. Kindness was not weakness. Compassion was not weakness. It was strength, greater than any weapon, greater than any army. Days passed. They buried the scouts beneath the sand, leaving no trace of the battle. The girl grew stronger. She was able to walk, to climb the rocky hills with the human at her side. At night, they sat beneath the stars. She listened to him hum softly, a tune from his world, and though she did not understand the melody, it made her feel safe. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of sunset, she spoke again. Her voice was firmer now, her words clearer. "I know I'll go back. Not to them. Never." The human studied her, his eyes calm, then nodded once. He did not question her. He did not push her. He simply accepted her choice. She felt something shift inside her. For so long, she had carried the weight of betrayal, the chains of fear. But now, for the first time, she felt free. Free to choose her own path. Free to walk beside someone who saw her as more than a soldier, more than a tool, more than a burden. Hope bloomed in her heart like a flower rising from the desert sand. That night, she dreamed again, not of betrayal, not of abandonment, but of walking beside the human across a vast horizon. She dreamed of battles fought together, of laughter shared, of a future built not on cruelty, but on kindness. When she woke, her chest was light. She smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. The human saw her smile. His lips curved into one too, faint but real. And in that small exchange, in that fragile connection, something unbreakable was born. The alien girl had been abandoned to die, but in the hands of humanity's kindness, she had found life again. She had found hope.